the medical examiner does what it needs to do before releasing the bodies to the loved ones, where they may be interred at the wishes of their family members. Another thing we should tell you about, and this happened some 20 plus minutes ago, we chose not to reveal it, that indeed the Hurricane Ida has made landfall. We felt we should stay with the dignity and solemnity of this particular dignified transfer, but it has made landfall. Again, just a few moments ago, 20 minutes or so ago, Bill Cairns came and whispered it to me at the moment that it had made landfall. So let's go to Bill Cairns if we can right now. He is joining me again in studio. Port Fourchon, I think, was the point at which it crossed over land?
Yeah, and there's no one there. It's all been evacuated. It's just a little oil port that's out there in the practically in the Gulf, and that's where the center went over. So this is the satellite view, and this little clear spot shows you the eye of the storm, and you can see it went right over the top there. So now it's going over Terrebonne Bay, and then it's going to head inland. So this is when the destruction is going to begin. I just looked at the power outage report. There's 104,000 people without power now in Louisiana, so those numbers are beginning to grow. So as far as the radar goes, this is Grand Isle. That's where we had the 146-mile-per-hour wind gust. This is that Port Fourchon where the center of the storm is crossing over. So they went through this portion of the eye. They've been in the eye in the clear, and now they're about to go through the backside of the eye. Hopefully there's no one there that's left. Grand Isle, it's very windy. The storm surge is piling up. I've already seen reports of 7 to 8 feet of storm surge in this area up towards all the way through southeastern Louisiana. So now as the storm moves inland and the eye moves inland, we have this extreme wind warning. Anything in this purple here, they've been told you're under an extreme wind warning. These are pretty rare, only when we get eyes of hurricane making landfall. Winds of 115 to 150 miles per hour are possible anywhere in this zone. It does not include New Orleans, just south of New Orleans, but it does include Olek, Homa, Galliano, and that Grand Isle area, and that's where most of the wind destruction will be over the next couple hours. As far as the wind reports go, you notice that we still have our gauge, at least it's still working for now, just a 78-mile-per-hour gust at Galliano. Homa's just beginning to pick up. New Orleans is at 56 downtown. The lakefront's at 59. Notice the winds aren't quite yet the high winds to Baton Rouge and Hammond and Slidell. They're only in the 20 to 30 range. You have to get about 50 plus to start getting the downed trees, and that's when the power outages begin. So most of the power outages for now have been New Orleans southwards, but that's going to be expanding as the storm system moves on shore. So here's the latest from the Hurricane Center. It made landfall with winds of 150 miles per hour. That makes it ties it for the strongest ever landfall in Louisiana. It ties Laura from last year, and you have to go back all the way to 1856 for the last one that was 150. So you can do the math on that. 2 of the 3 strongest hurricanes to ever strike Louisiana were in the last 357 days, because Laura was only 2 days ago last year. Pretty incredible math if you want to look at that. So the slow movement is going to be a huge issue as we go throughout the rest of the day. Not only do those areas that are in that extreme wind warning have to deal with it for a longer period of time, but the extreme rainfall that's now arriving in Louisiana is going to start to really pile up. So we got the storm surge, we got the rain, there's water everywhere here for the next 12 hours in southeast Louisiana. Notice by the time we get pretty much due west of New Orleans at 7 p.m. this evening, still 105-mile-per-hour winds, and that's when we start getting into more highly populated areas. That's when we'll start getting more extreme population losses with the power outages. Then the storm goes over the top of Baton Rouge tonight, right around 10 p.m. It'll be near Natchez, Mississippi tomorrow morning at daybreak, and then it kind of weakens and does a big bend up towards the north there after that. So the big issue right now is storm surge. Shell Beach is located just to the east on Lake Bjorn, and that has a 7 to 8 foot storm surge right now, and it's still going up even as the tide goes out. And if you're wondering, we don't really talk about tides a lot in Louisiana. They only change about 1 to 2 feet from low tide to high tide. It's not like in the northeast or along the eastern seaboard with high and low tides, but still that 1 to 2 feet can make a little bit of a difference. So we'll continue to watch this, Alex, as the storm surge comes in. And the worst of the storm is now arriving in southeast Louisiana.
And we've got you on it. We appreciate that. Let's get an on-the-ground view, everyone, as we go to NBC's Morgan Chesky, who's in Homa, Louisiana. It's about 60 miles or so southwest of New Orleans.
Trailed by 1 after 3 quarters, came back to take the lead, win the game. Will it be deja vu 48 hours later? They hope we'll find out.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Turn him.
Which is hard to do.
It is, isn't it?
Ed Cohen, Mark Zupan, with you with the action from Tokyo.
Oh, he's on him. That's a turnover. That is is a turnover for the United States. That is brilliant. Great hit. That's exactly what they needed. They need to score on this. Need to score on this possession. Then we have a tie ball game, and it's on. One hit, and then Joe comes, and then all three of them hit him. It was like a pinball. But
Let's go to an NBC special report right now.
Tom Yamas reporting this afternoon in New Orleans along with Hallie Jackson in Washington. We are coming on the air amid several breaking news stories, including Hurricane Ida happening right now. It just made landfall this hour. Take a look at that. An extremely powerful Category 4 hurricane. Forecasters are warning of catastrophic rain, wind, and storm surge, which we have already started to feel. We'll have the very latest on the storm in just a moment, but first, let's go to Hallie with the other major stories we're following today.
Tom, thank you. We have some new developments on the crisis in Afghanistan, but first, an emotional day at Dover Air Force Base as the remains of 13 service members return to the U.S. in what's called a dignified transfer. President Biden and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden joining the families of the fallen whose loved ones were killed Thursday in a suicide blast outside the Kabul airport. 11 of them were Marines, one an Army soldier, another a Navy sailor. They are Marine Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui, Navy Corpsman Maxton Soviak, Marine Lance Corporal Riley McCollum, Marine Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, Marine Corporal Hunter Lopez, Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Naus, Marine Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, Marine Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, Marine Humberto Sanchez, Marine Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Marine Corporal Dagan Page, Marine Sergeant Jahani Rosario, and Marine Sergeant Nicole G. Those service members helping in that huge airlift mission to evacuate U.S. citizens and Afghans out of the country, with the Taliban now taking over. President Biden has warned more terror attacks targeting U.S. service members are imminent, and the administration is fighting back. Today, you had U.S. military forces conducting a drone strike that took out a suspected ISIS-K threat. Raf Sanchez is in Doha, Qatar. Raf, what can you tell us about the strike?
Hallie, all day U.S. forces in Kabul were bracing for a possible ISIS attack, and a little after 5 p.m. local time, the U.S. military says it carried out a drone strike on an ISIS vehicle heading towards Kabul airport. It says that vehicle was laden with explosives and posed an imminent threat. The strike happened in a residential neighborhood just west of the airport. The explosion happened near houses, and there are reports from the ground in Afghanistan that a child was killed in that explosion. The U.S. military says it is aware of those reports, but has no indication at this time of any civilian casualties. There are no reports of any injuries to U.S. military personnel, and the evacuation from Kabul airport appears to have continued uninterrupted ahead of President Biden's Tuesday deadline for withdrawing all U.S. forces. Hallie?
Raf, thank you. For the day's other breaking story, we want to head back to Tom Yamas in New Orleans, where Hurricane Ida is really bearing down. Tom, you are in the thick of it.
That's right, Hallie, and conditions are getting worse by the minute. My colleague and friend Sam Brock is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, just north of us. Sam, what are you feeling there? It's starting to get very ugly down here in New Orleans.
Tom, Hallie, good to be with you. The wind is starting to pick up here a little bit. We are right now, as you mentioned, in Baton Rouge. This storm at 150 miles an hour is as strong as any hurricane that has ever struck the state of Louisiana. You're feeling more of those effects right now than we are so far, but give it a few hours. Tom, walk with me for a second. Behind me, you will see all of these bucket trucks that are staged here, hundreds of them. I'm at the Mall of Louisiana as we pan along here, and you can just see they're ready to jump into action as soon as the storm has passed over Baton Rouge. But here's the problem, Tom. Baton Rouge has about 220,000 people in it. East Baton Rouge Parish, which is where we are, has more than 400,000. It is the most populous parish in the state of Louisiana, just over Orleans. No one here was given mandatory evacuations, and in fact, most of the places here don't even have windows that are boarded or sandbags or anything of that nature. As we pan along, you'll see that there is a restaurant across the way here that has some boards up. But as I drove through downtown, Tom, nothing was boarded. There is going to be a Cat 3, potentially at the time, hurricane coming over Baton Rouge in the coming hours, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Back to you.
Yeah, okay, Sam. Yeah, just be careful because what's coming for you is incredibly dangerous. We're starting to feel some of it here in New Orleans. I want to show our viewers at home what we're looking at right now, and this is just the beginning. We're going to be feeling this for hours right now. We're seeing just a little bit of structural damage right now. Lighting poles here in the French Quarter already starting to be bent. Lighting's coming down as well as palm fronds and other tree branches are falling. Hurricane Ida is starting to impact the Gulf Coast, but the worst is definitely ahead. Al Roker is tracking Ida for us. Al, what's the latest on the storm's path and what has changed so far?
Well, I got to tell you, Tom, this will be the first time any state's had two back-to-back in successive years, 150-mile-per-hour plus hurricanes hit. If you look right now, you can see wind gusts of over 75 miles per hour to 50 to 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Right now, Ida is currently about 15 miles, 57 miles south of New Orleans, 150-mile-per-hour winds, northwest of 13 for that movement, and this thing is going to start to push its way inland, and as it does, it'll still be a Category 4 storm for another few hours and then drop down to a 2 as it makes its way inland, bringing more heavy rain. We are looking for storm surges of up to 16 feet in some sections along coastal Louisiana. We're also going to be looking at the very dangerous winds, with those winds causing major power outages for a huge area, wind gusts of over 100 miles per hour in some sections, and the rainfall amounts. We're talking isolated amounts, 2 feet of rain, Tom, and that's going to cause big problems because the ground's already saturated here, and as it makes its way up into the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys, it's going to be bringing 3 to 5 inches of rain as well. But as you can see, we are nowhere near through this thing yet. The eye wall making its way into New Orleans, and we're going to continue to have big problems over the next several hours, at least until later this evening around 10 o'clock, Tom.
All right, Al, we thank you for that. Please stay safe throughout our coverage. And again, it's hard to believe, but this is the 16th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Now another hurricane, Hurricane Ida, hitting on the same day. The new levee system will be put to the test. Everyone here hoping that they work. I'll have much more tonight in a special edition of NBC Nightly News. And for the very latest, head to NBCnews.com and MSNBC. For Hallie Jackson in Washington, I'm Tom Yamas in New Orleans. This has been an NBC News special report.
You heard it. That indeed was an NBC News special report. I'm Alex Witt. The breaking news continues for you here on MSNBC. Hurricane Ida has officially made landfall. This is a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 150 miles per hour. Flooding is already certainly a big problem. Let's go right to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. So let's see what the track is. Where does this thing stand right now? Where's it going next?
Yeah, so as we go throughout the afternoon and into the evening, we're going to be tracking the eye because that's where the most extreme wind damage will be occurring. At the same time, we'll bring you any pictures that we get in of the storm surge damage, which is now moving into many areas of southeastern Louisiana and southern Mississippi. So you can see the eye here. Port Fourchon just went through the eye. They're about to head out the backside. Leesville's kind of on the edge of the eye. It's a very small community there. So we haven't really sent the center of the storm yet over any highly populated areas. It's still over very swampy land. It will start moving over population centers after it goes across Terrebonne Bay. That's this area right in here. So we have about another, I'd say 2, maybe 3 hours until we start getting the eye, and whatever intensity it's at when it gets there, the destructive winds that'll look like a tornado in some of those communities, and that's going to head up more towards Houma. So let me give you a wider view of the storm, and you can see here, that's the inner portion of the eye. We actually have what we call a dual eye wall right now. So we got the center eye, which is about 20, 25 miles wide. Then we have this outer ring, which is about 50 to 55 miles wide. The outer ring likely has winds with it, maybe up to 100 miles per hour. The inner one is the one that has winds that can get up to the 150 to 160. So you don't want to be in either, but the inner one right now is still the stronger one. So the big question is, will New Orleans get into this band? Because that's the band that will have up to 100 mile per hour winds. As of now, that is expected to stay just outside of New Orleans. But that's what we'll be tracking throughout the day, is how close does New Orleans get to those 100 mile per hour wind gusts that are with this band to the south. If this whole mess, though, is heading in this general direction, almost right over the top of Houma, and that's the biggest population center south of New Orleans with about 30 to 33,000 people that live there. Current wind gusts, that's the highest I've seen yet at the lakefront in New Orleans at 60 miles per hour. Kind of makes sense with that wind coming out of the east-northeast off of Lake Pontchartrain, unblocked by any buildings or trees. That's why it's a little higher there. And that's the wind gust from Galliano we've had for a while now. So we'll have to see if that wind gauge is still functioning because it's now really in the heart of the storm. So the storm's going to head over home, and we'll see how long that gauge also continues to give us wind gusts. Probably one of the last times I'll check our computer models to kind of see where the storm's going. When you get this close at landfall and then moving through the south, over land, they're in excellent agreement, all safely to the west of New Orleans. That's, if you have a New Orleans perspective on this, but this does take it over almost to the top of Houma, just to the east of there. Very close to going over the top of Hammond and Baton Rouge. Somewhere in the middle of those two is kind of what the models are pinpointing, and that's at 9 p.m. this evening. So for anyone interested in Baton Rouge and Hammond, that is when your highest wind gusts will be, right around 9 p.m. local time this evening. And then overnight, the storm should be significantly weakening by about midnight when it crosses from Louisiana into Mississippi. So from Natchez, Mississippi, which is right here, over to Macomb, your strongest winds will likely be about 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. That would be the best chance. If you lose power, that's when it would occur. So as far as the Hurricane Center goes, they're continuing to give us hourly updates. We'll start to see the winds slowly beginning to weaken over the next couple hours. But as of now, still 150-mile-per-hour winds. That's a strong Category 4 hurricane, which ties it with Laura from last year. And here's the actual forecast from the Hurricane Center. They think that by the time it's pretty much due west to this evening at 7 p.m., it goes to 105 Category 2. By the time it gets to Baton Rouge, it should be going down to Category 1. By the time it gets to Mississippi, then a tropical storm as we wake up early tomorrow morning. And the storm surge is obviously going to be one of the huge issues. We're already seeing reports now of 7 to 8 feet of storm surge. And what you have to remember, storm surge is, let's say you go to the beach and say whatever level that water is at, that is what we call like the ground level. That's the base. On top of that is the storm surge. So if it was at 3 feet, it would be up to here on me. If it was at 6 feet, it'd be a little bit over my head. And if you notice, if you get up to 9 feet and then 12 feet, it just goes up and up. Most of the structures in southern Louisiana, they have to be usually like 10 to 12 feet at least above the ground level. And so that's why when you talk about the storm surge of 12 to 16 feet, that's when it gets a little iffy for those structures, even on the pylons. And then on top of that, you get the wave action and the winds, and that's when you can have problems with the water even going into structures that are a little higher. And as we go throughout the evening, once the winds start to come down, we're not done with the destruction from this storm because, some of the historic aspects of this storm could be the rainfall, the flash flooding, and how much water is going to come down. The storm has slowed down, and even New Orleans, those pumps, there's 99 of them. Last I heard, 97 were working and functioning. They're ready to go. They're going to be tested with this storm. They've already said they don't expect to be able to keep up exactly. There will be some roads that will be flooded, but when all the pumps are on, they have to get up to 20 inches of rain in a short period of time out of the city. And New Orleans is below sea level. The levees have been built up, $15 billion worth, 16 years ago after Katrina, to protect from the storm surge. And so far, all reports are that's working. But the pumps are going to have to do their job, too. And they're going to be tested with 20 inches of rain. And as far as the wind potential, those 100-mile-per-hour winds is kind of in this swath here. New Orleans would be right here, so we don't think that they're going to get into that 100-mile-per-hour winds, but we'll watch that later today. But extreme power outages all through this region. We're already up about 110,000 power outages in Louisiana, and by the time this evening comes, everyone in red should expect to lose power, and that includes the New Orleans area, Hammond to Baton Rouge, and even southern portions of Mississippi, Alex. So we're getting into the portion of the storm where people are going to start to really see it moving in. We're starting to have some of our population centers starting to get into what we call the heart of the hurricane. That's when you lose power. That's when the destruction begins on your property.
Speaking of losing power, I'm just looking at an email that I'm getting from one of our producers who says that there are reports from WDSU that, in fact, sewage and water board reporting power outages at some of the pump stations there in New Orleans. That is not to be unexpected, certainly, but that only complicates matters when you have the flushing of the systems, if you will. If that's going to get backed up, then we're looking at potential biohazard situation here, right?
When you're below sea level like New Orleans is, you have water everywhere coming from the sides, hopefully held out by the levees, and water coming from the sky, and you got to pump it out, try to fast enough. Power outages, which can affect the pumps. It only makes sense that water everywhere, and that includes sewage.
Yeah, let me ask you quickly, those of us here in the Northeast, we went through Henri last weekend, certainly nothing compared to this storm, but tell that to those who did suffer with some sort of damage or power outages as a result of that. How long do you think it'll be until the remnants of Ida move all the way towards the at least mid-Atlantic area?
There are some computers that are saying that we could get 4 inches of rain even in like the New York area on Wednesday from this storm. So, yeah, this is going to have, it won't be even even a tenth of the damage in Louisiana. No. But even our friends in the Tennessee Valley, Kentucky, Tennessee, although I mentioned Mississippi a lot, West Virginia possibly, even Pennsylvania.
Tennessee doesn't need this.
We could, yeah, it's been a very wet summer in areas of the east. And of course, everyone in the west with all the fires is like, give us a little, but it's been a wet summer in the eastern half of the country. We're going to be dealing with flash flooding and river flooding right through the end of the week with this storm. Obviously, the concerns are the immediate now is because this is when the storm's the most dangerous. But, yeah, we got a long ways to go.
I think it's very difficult to deny the effects of climate change when you see the extremes that this country is going through around the world, certainly. You've articulated it very well, the wetness of the south and the east, and then the just horrific heat, the drought in the west.
There is a trend in the last couple years of a lot of these Gulf storms have been rapidly intensifying all the way up to landfall. We had a period before this where a lot of them kind of got to land and then they kind of petered off and they weakened a little bit as they made landfall. But talk to the people in Mexico Beach that had to deal with Michael. That storm intensified all the way to a Category 5 right up until landfall. Laura was a very intense storm right up to landfall. Now we have this example too. And the fact is, the warmer the planet is, the warmer the oceans will be.
That's right.
And the oceans are the fuel for these storms. So every degree of warmth makes a difference to help these storms get a little bit stronger. So, yeah, climate change certainly is not helping.
I think you also referenced that these Gulf waters are among the warmest anywhere on Earth right now.
This storm, so you need 80-degree water is typically what you need for these storms to get strong. This storm went over water that was 86 to 90 degrees. And it wasn't just that, because usually, if you ever go to the beach and the water on top's kind of warm, right? And if you dive down a little bit, it kind of gets cooler pretty quickly. This storm went over water that was 80 degrees all the way 150 feet down. Oof. So, these storms churn the ocean, they churn the waves, and that brings up some of the cooler water. We call it upwelling. So, and typically, if a storm stalls, it's less fuel because it's cooler water. This was over such deep, hot water that even as it churned it up, it didn't even make a difference. It was just churning up warm water. So, this storm went over some of the most extreme water, not just how hot it was, but how deep that water was, too. So this could have been a Category 5.
Storm,
I think if the storm hadn't been interrupted, it went over Cuba as a Category 1 hurricane. It kind of interfered with the circulation a little bit. This easily could have been a Category 5 if it didn't cross over Cuba and weaken slightly 2 days ago.
Okay, Bill, I know you're getting more information, so you can go back to the Weather Center, and we'll see you again shortly. As we go back and give you a picture, everybody, of Gulfport, Mississippi, that is where our colleague Shaq Brewster has been throughout this day. Just a short while ago, if you've been with us in our continuing coverage, we saw Shaq, and the winds had somewhat diminished. It looked like it was a little bit of a better picture there. This more reflects what we saw from Shaq earlier this morning between the hours of about 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. So you can see that the bands are circulating, and just because you have a live shot that shows you what something looks like at one moment in time, it is a snapshot. This is a different live picture than what we had with Shaq less than an hour ago. And you look at the severity of the weather there, how it has certainly diminished for all those there in Gulfport, Mississippi. Let's talk about the United Cajun Navy. That is something that is very unique to this country. It has been activated. It is ready to respond to Hurricane Ida. And Jordy Bloodsworth is the fleet captain of the Louisiana Cajun Navy. And Jordy is joining me right now. Jordy, welcome to you. I had on the founder of the Cajun Navy earlier on the broadcast this morning. He was talking about your rescue efforts and actually the focus being helping people as the storm passes with those things that they will need. What are you focused on specifically right now? What is your priority?
My first priority is always rescues and keeping people safe and the immediate aftermath of the storm. That's kind of my first position that I head up in, making sure all of our efforts are ready to roll at the first second somebody says they need help.
Okay, I want to let everyone know as we speak to you, Jordy, we're looking at live pictures of downtown New Orleans. We're getting a very clear look at the amount of water coming down there, lots of wind as well. So, Jordy, real quickly, I'm going to go to the National Hurricane Weather Center in just a moment. But let me ask you about 2 days from now, what will you be focused on? Will you still be in sort of recovery efforts there with the Cajun Navy?
Hopefully not. If it doesn't flood, which we're praying for, and it doesn't look like it might not be that bad of a flooding event, more of a wind event, then we'll kind of regroup and, put the boats away and pick up our assets, food and water, and set up distribution centers so we can start feeding people and getting ice, water, and just the necessities, things like that. So everybody can kind of start getting that thing together.
Offer some semblance of normalcy to those folks that have been affected. How many of there are you, Jordy, in the Cajun Navy? How many with whom do you work directly?
Directly, there's about 10 of us kind of on what we call our core team. But other than that, I mean, there's thousands, and there's different people, who can help every year. And in the last 6 years of doing this, I've literally worked with thousands and thousands of people and companies that have helped out and let us do what we can do.
Yeah. Okay. Jordy Bloodsworth, the fleet captain of the Louisiana Cajun Navy. Jordy, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck in your efforts as you try to help those around you there. Good on you, and well done. Joining me right now, Ken Graham, who's the director of the National Hurricane Center. Ken, we've seen each other far too often lately, but I am glad to have you here. What is the very latest with Ida? Has it gotten to be as bad as you anticipated now that it has been made landfall? Put that in perspective. Better than you anticipated, right on the line, or worse than you anticipated?
Yeah, I think, Alex, it's one of the situations that, we've made landfall at, the readings we got 150-mile-per-hour winds. So it's going to take some time to see really what happened in some of those areas. But, if you got that kind of wind, there's catastrophic damage around Port Fourchon, Grand Isle. There just has to be. But we have hurricane force winds out 50, 52 miles from the center. So, just because we've made landfall, it's not over. It's just starting.
Okay, so what are your concerns about next? I know we'll have power outages. That will certainly come with the territory. But when you weigh the ravages of flooding versus the wind, what do you focus on first?
Yeah. I'll tell you, Alex, that you look back in history and you look at hurricanes in the past, 90% of fatalities in these tropical systems, it comes from the water. So, yes, we're going to have some wind. We're going to have some hurricane force winds, Baton Rouge, Metro New Orleans, and it's going to cause so many power outages. But it's the water, it's the storm surge historically that causes so many fatalities. 12 to 16 feet of storm surge, that's really close to landfall. So Port Fourchon was the landfall. It's right in the center, and off to the right side is where you see those peak values. You just hope everybody was out of these areas. So once we start to see the storm surge become less of a problem, and then we really get into this problem right here, the rainfall. And that's just not on the coast. That's well inland as well. So, I mean, there's not too often that we have forecasts for 10 to 20 inches of rain. That's just a life-threatening situation around portions of southeast Louisiana. But look in this area, too, from Mobile back over to the Mississippi coast, 6 to 10 inches of rain. You'll have flooding well away from the center. And look what happens even moving north, central Mississippi, and eventually up into the Ohio Valley. You'll see places even as far as Kentucky seeing tropical rain. So we'll have to watch this over the next few days.
Yeah, and it was told by our NBC meteorologist, Bill Cairns, that in the New York area here where I am, we could be looking at about 4 inches of rain come Wednesday. I know that is long track. Let me ask you to reiterate something that is so important, and it bears repeating every single time we have a storm, Ken, and that is people who want to leave now. Maybe the wind subsides somewhat, and they think they have a car that can go through water and get themselves where they intend to go.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
No, Alex, thank you for making that point. It's so important because, we talk about storm surge being the leading cause of fatalities, but guess what? Number two, it's that inland rain, it's the inland flooding, and more than half of those are in automobiles. So turn around, don't drown. Especially at night, you're going to have the debris. You can't tell how much water's on that road. Never